Hey, good afternoon, evening, whatever the heck it is.
6 o'clock.
Welcome to Rock, Papers, Hand Grenades. This is show number 2. We're doing really good. We're competing with, who are we competing with on
I
national
didn't know we
television?
were competing with anyone.
Oh, absolutely.
Entertainment Tonight?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
This show has no competition.
Has no Thanks, Matt. Elizabeth and I and Matt have a couple of wonderful guests. Tonight the topic is Hillary Clinton's "It Takes a Village." It's a book written in the '90s by the former First Lady about the
The breakdown of the American family.
breakdown of the family. But basically, the tenet of the book is there's an African saying that it takes a village, i.e., a child isn't brought up by just parents, a child is brought up by a village. And that's the premise of the book. How she defines village is another question.
Exactly.
Our guest tonight is Ben Dick. He's a English teacher at Memorial High School.
Welcome, Ben.
And he's here to basically go over a little bit of what the teachers go through trying to deal with the children of today. And my friend Clara Mornier, who is done everything political. I can't even, the list goes on, but primarily I invited her today because she is a representative of Senator Rick Santorum's presidential campaign in New Hampshire. And Rick Santorum wrote the counterpart to It Takes a Village called It Takes a Family. So that's why we invited her to kind of touch on that aspect of it. Because if you really look at the issue, that's really almost what defines the difference between Republicans and Democrats. Republicans believe in personal responsibility, and Democrats tend to believe that the state and the federal government has a great deal of responsibility.
And welcome, Clara. We're glad to have you.
So I think we should let them introduce themselves a little bit, and then we'll move on, I guess. Is that okay?
Well, let's start out first with
Okay,
the
yes.
whole idea for tonight's. You're a little excited here. We're moving right along.
I can't wait to pull this pin. Go ahead. Sorry.
Again with the grenade.
Please
Again
wait till
with the
the end of the show,
grenade.
Gary.
Okay,
Exactly.
yeah. End of the show, we pull the grenade.
Again, the whole idea that we talked about last week was that I personally am opposed to the idea that it takes a village to raise a family, because I feel that although the idea is nice, it has been taken too far, and I feel that, and this was before I read the book, that her idea that it's necessary to have the government be the village. And that's what I thought she was going to say, but I had a lot of people say, well, you haven't read the book. The book's really good. She's got a lot of good things to say. So I said, okay, I'll take the challenge. I'll read the book. And I wasn't disappointed. She did, in fact, imply that the village was the government, and it's all about bigger government. The government putting its fingers in everybody's pie, and although it sounds good in the beginning, I mean, taken out of context, she has wonderful quotes. She has wonderful thoughts and ideas, but she seemed in every chapter to describe that the village was in fact not just the greater family or the community that surrounds you, but it was in fact, well, if you have trouble with your family, the government should make adoption easier. The government should have more control over deciding parental rights. And so that was my beef with this book. And so that's why we've invited you here, is just to kind of talk about how you feel about the book if you read it or if you understand about it, and how you feel society is being broken down by the mentality that it takes a village, that the parents and the core family is no longer as responsible as we once were. So, Clara, if you'd like to start.
So I don't know where to start.
Yeah, there's so much.
This is a very large topic.
Very.
Senator Santorum has written a book called It Takes a Family, as you mentioned. But let me see if I can pick just one facet of the topic. As you mentioned, Hillary Clinton has focused on more the aid to families with dependent children. Let's take the welfare issue.
Okay.
Okay, up until, I think, 1996, we had a program called Aid to Families with Dependent Children. And if a husband left or the boyfriend left and the woman is with the children, they qualify for a federal program called AFDC, or Aid to Families with Dependent Children.
Regardless of education, income?
Right, well, low income.
Okay.
There are income qualifications.
Okay.
And it was, the money it's a complex program, so, but we're talking about it very simplistically, or you get bored with the details. It's to help subsidize the children.
Okay.
Until the children reach 18.
Is this the Head Start program?
No, this is separate from, Head
Completely
Start is
separate.
another program. This is actual money. Federal dollars allocated to the state, and the state
Gives it directly to the people.
mother. It was called Aid to Families with Dependent Children.
Okay.
AFDC. And when the Republicans gained control of the House, while Bill Clinton was president, in fact, Senator Santorum was in the Senate at that time, and they proposed a new program which was called Welfare to Work. And President Clinton took on this Welfare to Work program and sold it as a substitute for the Aid to Families with Dependent Children, meaning you would get the resources a finite number of years, and at the end of that year, with the help, you're off.
Good.
The aid. And it was passed and is now currently law, and it's called TANF, is what the welfare officials call. So even the federal government has decided the aid to families with dependent children, actually, you would get money if there was no male in the house.
Oh, the
Okay,
feminist
so
in
it
me
led-
really wants to
it
pounce
led-
on that.
What's that? Yes, and what had happened, and I think a lot of people have felt, it has left to the quote, the dads disappearing,
Right.
a greater increase in divorce, and I think AFDC was passed in 1965. You're really tasking my memory here. And since that point in time, we had a decrease of the family, meaning divorce. The percentage of the American or the numbers of people who were divorced, and the percentages of marriages that ended in divorce increased.
Correct.
Okay, so even the federal policymakers, the government, quote, okay, decided that program wasn't working. Essentially, good intentions, let's help the children.
But the wrong way to do it.
The wrong way to do it, because it promoted the disintegration of the American family. And I think whether they were liberal or Democrat or Republican in Congress, they decided it was a wrong kind of policy. So you saw this TANF program where they're giving different number of years, but a program where they contract, they're giving, let's say, 5 years with aid for the family plus some supportive services, and at the end of that time they are off the government resources and on their own. And that's the current policy, and it seems to be working.
Which is a policy I agree with. I also
Yes.
agree with the whole drug testing in order to be on welfare.
The what?
The drug testing in order to be
Oh,
on
yes.
welfare. I
Yeah.
think you need to prove yourself before you get the aid.
And to give you an example of the numbers Claire is talking about, in the 1960s, there was roughly a 15 to 20% divorce rate amongst Americans. And that doesn't account for the fact that because people's responsibility or loyalty was to the children, a lot of those divorces were after the children had reached, 18 or 20
Right,
years
right.
old. Currently, the number, after the introduction of no-fault divorce by the early 70s, which went across the country, started in California, anything coming from California you should know better than to accept.
I'm from California. Watch it.
Well, the
I guess
jet
that-
stream did.
Yeah, that's true.
That proved my point. Anyway,
Hey,
no, so...
give me the grenade.
So, yeah, it went from about 15%, which is not, it went from 50 to 50% by the end of the 70s, compounded by the fact that we started looking so much less as the importance of marriage, because it changed from a loyalty to the children, we're going to stay married for the kids, to, well, if I'm not happy, the kids can't be happy,
Right.
which is this from
shift in
altruistic to
idea.
selfish, and it's not true. And so you increase the number of people who didn't even bother getting divorced at all, to the point that by the 80s we were building prisons by the hundreds just to try to throw everybody in jail because we were sick of the crime.
Well, I want to go back to the core issue for me when I first started thinking about this is I am kind of a big fan of Little House on the Prairie times, when families learned to read by the only book they had in the house, which was their Bible. And they were homeschooled because they couldn't travel far enough to get to a town to be taught in a building. And family, the core family, that's where you got your work ethic, that's where you got your morals, that's where you got everything was from that family. If you were blessed enough to live somewhere where you had extended family, then that was a wonderful gift as well. It didn't take the village that Hillary Clinton is referring to. And we built really good people. Look who founded our country. And that's what I think that we are getting away from in our current civil society. And that's what concerns me. And that's kind of the opinion I want to get from you is, do you see this breakdown of society? Do you see that I hear from friends and acquaintances things like, I don't have to help my kid with their homework because that's your teacher's job. They no longer feel that they have to do their job because it's now someone else's responsibility, whether it's the teachers or I don't have to discipline him. He got in trouble at school. It's now up to the police department. I've actually heard them say that when it comes to bullying or. So this is the core issue that I really want to talk about tonight is, do you see this? Have you seen it as a teacher, Ben, in your world? Are you now dealing with this mess as the core family falls apart?
Well, first and foremost, I think that in the classroom, I may not be privy to every detail about home life, about what type of family. Obviously, to some extent, I am, based on the kids I teach and the conversations we may have. But I could take a group of kids that I teach who we might consider coming from homes that aren't your nuclear family
Right.
that we've all seen, the idealistic time being the 50s and whatnot, and I could take 20 kids from that situation and find 10 who may in fact be dealing with things the way you're describing, and I could find 10 who aren't. I could find 10 who say, no, you're going to have that work ethic. I'm really glad you said work ethic because that's one of the things I preach
Do you?
in my class. I teach freshmen. 3 out of my 5 classes are freshmen.
Oh, good luck with that.
And they're I was saying this the other day, there's a beauty in wanting to teach kids that a lot of people don't want to teach. I
Right.
love them. I call them my people because I see some of these situations and I don't want to jump in and be the parent as you're saying. Some
But
people
don't you
feel
have
like-
to? Do you find that even in families where they might come from what looks like the Leave It to Beaver, family, if the parents simply are being too permissive, which I see a lot of, then that leaves the discipline and the teaching of good behavior and manners up to the rest of us.
The funny thing is I think that I was talking about this with my wife on today when I knew I was coming on, and
Right.
she's also a teacher, though she teaches in Bedford, and we were both describing one thing that's similar between our two populations is that I don't see a lot of the "you handle it, Mr. Dick," you take care of this with my kid. In fact, I actually see a lot of the opposite, where if I say, Gary, you're failing because you didn't do A, B, C, and D. You didn't hit that work ethic that I've been preaching to you from day one.
How'd you know?
I get a lot of. we can smell our own.
well said.
So I get a lot of, well, no. There's no way Gary didn't do that. My Gary, he does everything he's supposed
As in
to.
defensiveness.
As in defensiveness. A sense of entitlement is the thing that I see more of that than I do, you need to take care of this for me.
At least they're engaged, though. I mean,
it's almost like a passive engagement.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
almost like
It's a show.
You could be the student who turned over 20 desks and 15 kids saw you do it, and it's not that your parents engaged, it's that your parents says no way you did it.
yeah, they're
Imagine
protecting
doing
them.
Don't tell me because
Yeah.
I don't want to deal with it.
Yeah.
I don't want to
Well,
know. Therefore, it wasn't my
But
kid.
again, see, it's not that I don't want to deal with it. It's that he wouldn't do that, and I know you don't. And I'm
That's
over,
interesting.
Yeah.
I think that I don't see a lot of the you be my surrogate parent for me. I don't see that. Now, granted, I think part of that is because I teach high school. My wife, prior to being in Bedford, taught in Manchester. She taught in one of the inner city schools. And she and I were discussing today the idea that in that situation, she was at times more of the person who had to, do you have a snack today? You got a snack? Okay, I'll get the snack for you because you don't have one, because you can't afford one, or you forgot it, or your parent didn't wake up yet and you already got yourself together and came to school. You do see that. I just don't think it's as prevalent as maybe some of us think it is. I see equal cases, at worst I see equal cases of you be the surrogate and no, I'm going to do everything and don't you just stick to your job and I'll take care of my kid.
Oh, that's interesting.
But again, I work in a high school. I work in those kids have grown up to the point where maybe they know how to tell their parent what they want to hear, so
Right.
that the parent goes,
I was good at
Hey,
that.
I was about to say,
right,
I was a
okay.
teenager. I might
Yeah.
remember a couple
Right.
of things about that.
Yeah.
I don't have the elementary experience to share, but I've seen it. I know a lot of elementary school teachers who do have to help out. It's one of those things. How do we get that back under control? I think we need. When I heard when I first spoke to Gary and he said, we're going to talk about It Takes a Village. I haven't read the book. I'm at a disadvantage, maybe, or maybe I'm not. You
You're
had
not
said
at a
maybe I'm not.
disadvantage.
I also haven't read It Takes a Family. But when I hear It Takes a Village, the image that comes into my head isn't that it's off my shoulders as the parent, it's on everybody else's. The image that comes into my head is we all do our part.
Right.
We all have a role to play in that village. And it shouldn't be, the number one role should be the parent. I agree 100% with that. I think that you do as much parenting as you possibly can. Now, my parents, I had two parents. They were married. They were together the whole time I was in that house and still are together today. They were both there to do their part. They could do 95% of that parenting, even though they both worked. When I came home with a D on my progress report, it was, you're going to fix it. It was, that was it, and the end of story. There are families that have the one parent that works 3 jobs,
Yeah.
and he or she can't do 95% of the parenting, maybe. So other people need to do their little bit, is how I view
But
it.
what is parenting? Parenting, for me, and what I guess I focus on, parenting is teaching. And I know this is a cliche to say it's not quantity time, it's quality time. But really, to some degree, that's an absolute truth. Something that I don't see when I was teaching homeschool kids, one of the things that I didn't see was behavior and consequence were not being taught. And that's one of the biggest things that I wanted to teach my kids, who are now, let's see, I'm going to give away my age, 13, 15, and today 18. And that's something that I don't see. As I'm watching the girls who are now in public schools, so we've got middle school and high school and just graduated high school, and I'm seeing these kids who've never heard of my behavior has a consequence attached to it, good or bad. This escapes them entirely. And when I see kids have bad behavior, I don't necessarily look at the kid and go, bad on you. I automatically look at the parents and I think, where were you? Bad on the parents. Because I know how I hold myself accountable. And the parents, frankly, this is really harsh. Today in Boston, we saw a few unique outfits in young ladies, and my first thought was, does she not have a mother?
Oh, you see a lot of that now.
And I honestly have to ask myself, holy cow. And so anyway,
No, it's interesting. I've been reading some, in the past week or two, some articles out of just popular magazines. And they are now focusing on the point where these young people who have gone through a school system that's encouraged them, the school system is told not to discourage them.
All about
you don't want to
self-esteem.
destroy their self-esteem, their self-image. So now they're hitting the
That's
job
another show.
market. Now they're
Right.
hitting the job market, and they are hitting reality and being absolutely deflated, and are running into mental health issues where they
Interesting.
need counseling. They are not able to handle what is, quote, the
I had
real
not
world
thought
on the
or heard
job
of that.
market, and it is
Yeah.
becoming an issue with employers. And I've noticed it in a number of popular type magazines where this is surfacing as an issue.
I find that fascinating. I never even thought about that.
That's your next.
Well,
I think that
really
might
would
be.
It would be a great show. That's another thing that I work on. We have a saying. I created it. I'm trademarking it tonight on this show.
Okay.
And
Take note.
And that saying is, try your best, don't be the best. Because I say, I have 30 kids in there, I say, one of you can be the best,
Right.
and it's me. So, there's the rest of you. But that doesn't prevent you from trying your best. And you're right, when what happens is they've all been told that they are the best. And I will say this, though, this is a big thing for me, is that it's hard to say, it may start with that parent that doesn't monitor the clothing or doesn't
Right.
teach the consequence, which I'm working very hard on with my 2-year-old twins right now. And
Oh, God bless you for
boy,
twins.
Girls,
And
How do you think
two.
I hurt the arm? No, just kidding. But
girls or boys?
one of each. I
really?
don't mess
Oh,
around.
no, that's
And your wife's like, I'm done now. I'm done.
My wife's like, I'm done. I'm done.
Yeah.
But God bless them, they are the best. But it's this idea that it's hard to see who's really perpetuating that idea more. Because it may have started with the parents. It may have, it may not have. But you play Little League now. Everybody gets the trophy. Until you're
Right.
13, you don't even count the score. Every kid knows who won, but nobody officially says you won or you lost, because
Right.
that might be a bad thing.
It might hurt somebody's feelings.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and I think it's become such a big problem that I don't even know that if we cut off that, if we fixed all of the parenting that isn't looking at it and saying it's okay to be third place, hey, there's nothing wrong with that. I never won a thing in my life. I don't know that we could suddenly stop everything else that's perpetuating that concept.
Well, I know one of the things Hillary Clinton did say in the book, I forget who, I can't read my own writing well enough to, and it's true, is that right now, if you look at New York City, one of the groups of people that have been hit the hardest by the culture we're in, the me generation, and it was also the welfare, was the black community in Washington, D.C. 75% of them are brought up in single or broken homes. And Hillary quoted one study where it says that tends to lead towards violence. And it was a long time ago, I was reading a study article, and it had a situation in Africa where they tried to introduce elephants into this old reserve where they had been vacant or vacated a long time ago or killed off. So what they did is that they felt the wisest thing to do was use these small young elephants because they're easier to transport. They transported the young elephants in there, and as those elephants reached almost like what would be equivalent to teenage, they started killing the white rhino off. Okay, and they didn't know why. I mean, elephants typically aren't aggressive like that, but they were teenagers, they were full of testosterone, and they wanted something to do, so something was fun was killing off the white rhino. What the way they resolved the issue, because they ended up having to kill a few of the elephants, was to introduce full-grown bull elephants,
Mature elephants.
and it calmed them right
Yeah.
down.
Yeah.
So, to me, a lot of the violence we see in school and in things like that is directly proportional to the fact that you have such profound fatherlessness compared to 60 years ago. Right now, like a black girl is twice as likely to go to college as a black boy, and that's because over 90% of those girls are brought up with a biological role model in the home.
I see what you're
Interesting.
saying, yeah.
Okay, only
Yeah.
That's actually rather profound. It really is.
I said something good.
You said something really good.
I was just so hoping I'd get something off tonight.
Gary, next week we're going to present you with a certificate.
No, better yet, one of the medals or the trophies.
Right. Yeah, we should all get one.
We have
all have
kids.
one,
We've
that's
got some
right.
at home. We'll bring one in. I'd like to remind viewers of our phone number. Feel free to call in. The number is 413-0223. If you'd like to call in, we'd like to hear from you.
That's area code 603 if you're watching from outside of Manchester.
That's right.
Oh yeah, there could be.
It could be.
Could be, there's no telling.
One of the things that Hillary did say at the beginning of her book that I really liked, she said there was a consensus among adults, she's referring past tense, and this is one of the things I actually agree with her. There was a consensus among adults that they needed to present a united front when dealing with children. That is how I parented with my husband. It was, you and I will discuss it privately, but in front of the children, we will be united. And I'm seeing in just the people in my neighborhood, in my world, in my community, I'm no longer seeing this, and that concerns me. And I think that is a core problem.
Isn't that also a function of divorce?
No, not necessarily. You cannot
Because-
blame everything on
No,
divorce.
well, I'm gonna, you watch.
Well, stop it.
Because a lot of times after the parents break up, okay, I can see.
No, go ahead.
After they break up, they use the children as kind of pawns to, and so the father gets them every other weekend, spoils the kid rotten. Yeah, I don't care if you do that. I
Bribes
don't care
them.
if you do that. I don't care if you do that. Then they go back to see mom. Hasn't slept, since midnight or something like that. They're bad behaved and everything else. It takes a few days just for mom to calm them down again.
And
So-
then the kid learns to play that game.
Oh, he definitely
yeah.
wants to
Oh,
play
yeah,
that
they're
game.
pretty sharp.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I mean,
get that.
There have been a lot of data showing where you don't have a dad in the house. Those children are far more likely to commit crime. There have been a number of studies, far more likely to commit a crime, more likely to get in trouble in school, more likely to quit school, less likely to go on to higher education. I mean, there have been significant number of studies just objectively proving the point that the children are far better off with a dad.
and I
in
don't disagree
the
with that.
household. Yeah.
But I'm
and-
also,
but-
go ahead.
Yeah, but you're absolutely right. They both have to be committed to being there for the children.
Or at
And-
least giving the same message.
Yes. In fact, I read another article recently where this generation of high school students have far too many choices. They are actually overwhelmed with the choices they have, and our society has become not as interested in providing a structure by which to make those choices. And the thinking now is for parents who are really thinking about their kids, there has to be a value structure by which those
They can
teenagers
choose.
can evaluate the choices and can make far better choices.
I agree with that wholeheartedly.
Okay, that's part of what you're getting to.
I
Yes,
think I
yeah.
agree completely. Now, I do want you to tell us a little bit about this book. I'm quite fascinated what Senator Santorum's angle was.
Yes, his angle, he starts out, he has a number of angles. Senator Santorum is a very thoughtful individual, and he has more ideas than I know how to put into small
I
sentences.
have yet to meet him, so I'm
You
quite
have
interested.
to meet him. With your issues and the way you're discussing this topic, you have to meet him. First, in terms of the family, he views the family as the basic unit of our whole culture. And he says, but you need a general society that's committed to the general welfare. And he goes back to the Founding Fathers.
Good.
Okay, the Founding Fathers believed that the function of a government is to provide a healthy society.
Agreed.
Okay, and that means everyone promotes the general welfare. And in doing that, he quotes John F. Kennedy and the statement, ask not what you can do for your country, but what, not the country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. And he says that has disappeared. We have a far less commitment. It is more a me society now.
Definitely.
We're more concerned of what is good for us.
Instant gratification.
Yes, and if you look back at the Founding Fathers, how much they gave up to make sure our country grew as a nation and developed as a nation. Many of them cost their personal fortunes. If
Absolutely.
you read the men who were in the Constitutional Convention, and the number of men and women who gave up their lives in the American Revolution just so we could have a country. They were more concerned about founding a
Right.
republic of freedom. Okay,
To your point, one thing about that was the people that signed the Declaration of Independence. If everybody remembers John Hancock, the reason he signed it so big, it was like telling the
your
crown
face.
in your face.
Really? Is that why?
Oh, yeah.
absolutely.
Oh, yeah, because he knew
Quote is, "Let
any
George read it without his glasses."
Yep, exactly.
Yes,
The
yes.
I'm an
English
English
teacher,
teacher.
exactly.
Okay.
And the founding fathers
So-
is one of our favorite subjects,
Okay,
absolutely.
well, the thinking of the founding fathers are woven through his book, but the basic foundation of this society is the nuclear family, and he views it like a grain of sand. If you're the individual, grains of sand. If you try to build something with a grain of sand, it'll fall apart. Or grains of sand.
Right.
You need a family to have the cohesion to build a foundation to that good for the general society. So he views the family as the basis for this structure. And this family then needs outside institutions in society, and he views religious institutions and other institutions that provide social services, not government, but other individual
Interesting.
institutions in the society. And he talks about Robert Putnam's book, Bowling Alone.
I'm not familiar with it.
Okay, that's, he is a Harvard political scientist or sociologist. He works closely with Lou Feldstein, or did. Lou is now promoting Bowling Alone. And they're doing, measuring how our society is disintegrating. And he uses the example of bowling. Back in 1950, the vast majority of bowlers belonged to a league, meaning an association,
Right.
an organization. Today, most bowlers bowl by themselves.
Well, that's-
Bowling associations very seldom exist.
That's very interesting.
And he points, and he has the numbers to prove. He's done tons of research to prove. Whenever if you go back to de Tocqueville, the Frenchman who came, he came to America after the French Revolution, and he did an analysis of why the American Revolution succeeded and built a country, and why the French Revolution did not succeed in building a country. In fact, they went back to Napoleon and created another empire
Right.
rather than an independent republic. And it's very thoughtful. But the basic assumption is that we created an independent side because we had all these independent associations. Whenever there was a problem, we'd form a committee,
Right.
okay, to solve that problem. In the French situation, they would look to the government, and that was the result they went back to.
Oh, that is
and-
really interesting.
That really is.
Okay, and I didn't articulate it as well as Senator Santorum.
No, I get it, though.
And I like
you
the
get
bowling
the point.
analogy. I really like
And
the
that's
analogy.
Robert Putnam. So Senator Santorum's done a lot of research, and a lot of it is other articles. Other books are woven into his own book, but then he stamps it with how he feels,
How he feels.
and how he thinks.
Now, when did he write this? And was this in direct response to Hillary Clinton's
Yes,
book?
it was in direct response to It Takes a
It Takes a
Village.
Village. Was he a senator at the time?
Yes, he was. Yes, he served 2 terms in the U.S. Senate, but he's a very thoughtful person. He's not good with, the one-liners that capture the news.
That's gonna hurt him running for
And
president.
whenever
I know.
he gives a speech,
Is that required?
I paid for this microphone.
I'm afraid he's not good at that. And then he's so thoughtful that I think sometimes people get bored by the time they listen to his lengthy explanation of where he got to where he is today, because a lot of research has been done. We haven't, you see some in popular magazines, we're ordinary people, but how often does an ordinary person read a book, Robert Putnam's Bowling Alone?
Right.
Or to look at the data.
No, most people have real lives.
Yes.
Plus, if American Idol's on,
Oh,
Yeah,
Well,
what are you gonna do?
yeah, but that's also talks a little bit about the disintegration of the family and the caring of the children. Now, I'm a little older than most of you, and my parents were farmers. So my mother and father were home all day, watching everything we did.
Yeah.
Okay, then.
It sounds frustrating.
Just a wee bit.
But the first movement towards disintegration of the American family is when Dad went off to work, when you no longer ran that family farm. So
That's-
you're
yeah.
beginning to
Makes
see the
sense.
division of the roles between men and women. Women stayed home, take care of the children, and dad went off to work and earned a living and supported the family.
Well, I know that in my family, I homeschooled my children until just about 4 years ago. And my oldest went into high school at the time. I got sick and had to put all three in school at the same time. And just since then, I've noticed a big difference in how much I'm able to. I'm not going to apologize. I'm an overprotective parent. I'm a paranoid parent. I'm a careful parent. For me, with some of my big issues, I'm not a perfect parent by any shape of the imagination. But age appropriateness is a big deal in my house. And I find now that they're all in public school, it's really hard for me to continue that with what they're hearing, what they're reading, and we don't have TV in the house, but we have videos. But even still, it's really hard to monitor these things now that I no longer have the full-time hawk-like control over my kids.
Oppressive, is that the word
No,
you're
no.
looking
And control over my kids is probably not what I meant to say either, although they were probably at home going, that's right.
Well, it's interesting. My sister has a PhD in biochemistry, right? She gave it up to take care of one little girl.
Right?
Okay, she was complaining about my mother who didn't raise us right because there were 7 of us.
Oh, my goodness.
And my sister's complaining, and she's got one little girl to look after. Well, she is like you. She didn't homeschool Sheena, but she took a real interest. She did not work. Okay, she gave up her career to raise this one little child.
Right.
Okay, so I call her a helicopter mom.
That's an accurate
And
description.
it took
yeah.
her almost full time to raise one child, so I can imagine how much work it took to raise 3, particularly when you're homeschooling.
Oh, it was great.
Okay. Now, the next step in the history of the family after they left the farm was the fact that women went into the workforce.
That's World War II.
That was, yes, with World War II. And, well, after World War II, when the men came home, the women went back to the house in the 50s. Okay, but with the 60s and
Freedom
feminism.
and feminism
Yes,
and all
feminism, okay. So that working in the house was devalued. So women who went in the workforce, developed careers, are actually probably acknowledged more, have a higher status in our society than women who stayed home.
Well, it's not just that, though. As soon as you introduce no-fault divorce,
Yes.
okay, now you've got a woman that if she stays home and watches the kids for the next 20 years, her college degree just went to dung because she has no work experience. They get divorced in a no-fault situation. They split 50-50. She gets almost nothing now. In fact, if you read the statistics, the children from divorce typically move into poverty
Yes.
because mom can't make that much. So the necessity for women to work has a lot more to do with self-preservation than because they know at any moment their husband can just say, oh, this isn't very much fun.
Well,
You know, I'm going golf and we'll see you.
right. Well, my situation, I haven't worked.
I wasn't
in-
going to bring that up.
I know.
I'm so nice.
It's
I'm
okay.
wicked nice.
Wicked nice.
Wicked nice.
Now we need 2 certificates for you.
I'll print those up when I get home.
Okay.
Well, my situation, when I had my first child, we had agreed beforehand we were going to be a traditional family. I was going to stay home with the kids. Like I said, I always homeschooled, so it's not like I didn't do things. I founded a homeschool organization that covered southern New Hampshire, northern Mass. I mean, I was a busy
But you
girl.
raised 3 children. You
I
did
didn't
do
just
things.
raise them. Yes.
Yes,
But now, here they are. The oldest just graduated, and things are what they are. And I just put my resume together this week, and I'm panicking because I have nothing to put on it. Last time I worked
You're a
for
TV
money.
show host.
No, that doesn't pay.
No, it doesn't.
Prospective employers don't have to know that.
Well, again, last time I worked was as a paralegal in California
Right.
20 years
But
ago.
see, you're saying that the basic problem is you're not rewarded for staying home and doing what the stay-at-home parents
right.
should do.
And I'm panicked
And we
as I
don't
go out to
value
the
it as a
workforce now.
society.
Right.
Yeah, it's
We
not
do
something.
not
you-
value it as a society. In fact, you're right about divorce. The biggest factor of going into the minute the divorce occur, it is the women who end up in the poverty level.
Right. It's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, for women over 65, those women who have a husband, if they're over 65, they're above the poverty level. If they don't have a husband and they're over 65, they're below the poverty level.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah, this is, we jokingly said someday there was an organization called Save the Whales.
Yes.
Okay, and we jokingly, when we looked at the data, men were dying off faster than women, so, and we looked at the data saying without the males, the women went into poverty. So we were going to form an organization, Save the Males, because that was the quickest way you could get a woman out of poverty.
That's cute.
I want to get Ben to chime in here a little bit. As a state legislator, every year I go up there and listen to my Republican friends land-based teachers as a whole.
Why?
Because they blame the difficulties with educating children on the teachers themselves. Now, I know that when I was in school, the teacher that might teach social studies probably was the janitor the day before, and because there really weren't that many requirements for what teachers could or couldn't do, because the children were in control well enough, or controlled well enough, or the behavior was good enough. So the teacher really, all he had to do is really teach what was in the text. And so I was just wondering how you feel as a teacher about that, because I think the problem with the school systems is typically the parents, not the teachers. An example would be my son was a school bus driver, and I'm not going to mention which town, and he said he would drop this one little kid, was really happy little kid. He'd drop the little kid off out in front of his house. And the kid would go about halfway up the driveway and just sit down and start crying.
Oh, that breaks
And
my
this
heart.
kept going and going. This
The
is
best
a
part
little
of his day
kid.
was school.
Huh?
The best part of his day was school.
Yeah, because he knew he was going into a home where his parents were just getting divorced. And kids internalize this. It's their fault.
Yeah.
You know, they don't understand the dynamics of adults being married. So they blame themselves.
Right.
So I kind of want to get a...
Well, I think as a profession, we've been under attack for a while now, but it gets progressively worse each year. There are a lot of, I think, unrealistic expectations on the profession in general. We are being asked to do more than ever with less than ever, in the sense of resources and things of that nature. Again, it goes back to what I was saying earlier about what happened first to start us on this path. And are we looking at situations where there just isn't the value in education from the home? Because it does
Right.
start there. However I may feel, by the time you're 15 or 16, you might have started to form your own way of looking at things. But from day one, you see the little kids are most excited, and as they go on, they're less and less excited.
Right.
Because there isn't the emphasis put on education anymore that there used to be. But God help you, if you don't go to college, you got to go to college no matter what. You have to go. You can't drop out if you want to anymore because A, there are no jobs, and B, you have to be 18 because we've said you have to be, but we're not going to give you any reason to stay. And that's
Right.
because we don't have the resources.
Right.
And I do think that as a profession, we are facing monumental challenges. We have to have every kid proficient on everything in 3 years. Again, it goes back to what I was saying. We can all try our best, but we can't all be the best. But I was told, and this comes from what, I use your words, your Republican friends, granted that Ted Kennedy helped out a little bit, and I don't care for that. But No Child Left Behind started this whole facade that,
Oh, gosh.
you know what, let's pretend for a second that we can all be the best.
Right.
And that did come from New Hampshire's own
Yeah.
Senator
Oh, yeah,
Gregg, I
Greg.
believe.
Oh, yeah. I was so mad when he did that.
Woo-hoo. George Bush, a man I voted for twice, and I'll say it, even though a lot of the people I work with will now yell at me for that.
Nobody's watching.
Oh, perfect. Well, that can change my language. No. But my point being that we are in a very unpleasant situation. We are expected to hit these unrealistic, in my opinion, milestones.
Milestones.
I'll go back to using my wife's situation as an example. She's in Bedford. She has to directly link students scores, to her goal setting every year. 80% of my kids are going to hit proficient on these things.
Is her salary based on this?
No, it's not, but their professional goals have to directly, as I understand it, she might tell me after this that I was a little off on explaining, so please.
I'm sure she will.
She's not watching either, who are we kidding?
Okay, I'm going to call her afterwards, and I'm going to tell her.
But they, whereas my goals at my school are going to be around what I believe is going to help me grow professionally, and it may not be. I might not arbitrarily, but I might say I want my scores to increase, but I'm not going to say I'm going to have 85% of my kids do this. Her school hits in the 90s. 90% or more of their kids as a school are proficient. They didn't meet AYP. They didn't meet it.
What's AYP?
AYP, I'm sorry, that's a No Child Left Behind term, adequate yearly progress.
Okay.
Every year you have to increase so much, so that eventually, in theory, 100%
Isn't that a
of your kids.
Ponzi scheme,
Really?
really?
Really, right? And so if 94% of her kids, or the school's kids, were proficient this year, and last year 96 of them were proficient, well, suddenly they didn't meet that progress,
So
because
what's-
only 94 out of 100 kids are really where they ought to be. Those 6 kids, sorry, you guys failed now.
So what is the consequence for the school? I don't think a lot of people realize this.
Initially, it's a, hey, next year you better fix it. And I'm no expert, so my timeline might be off. But after, I believe, 3 years, you're classified as a school in need of improvement. And if enough
Right.
of a district schools are under that heading, then you're a district in need of improvement. If you haven't improved, again, I want to say it's 5 years, though I could be wrong, and maybe this caller is going to tell me I am. But
your wife!
it is my wife. Oh boy, I didn't take out the trash. After 5 years, you are in restructuring, where the government essentially starts to come down and lay out things that you must do, or they're going to come in and they can start to say, we're going to do things. It's a big problem, because again, I want everybody. You said it really well when you talked about the book. It sounds like a great idea.
Yeah,
Everybody can do it.
sounds like it.
It sounds like a great idea, but not everybody can do it. And we are the ones who, the first group they look at. In states like Rhode Island, they've taken districts and they said, you're all fired, because too many of your schools
So-
are not meeting progress. You're all gone.
I have
Ben,
friends in
just-
Ohio that just went
we
through
get a
that.
phone call, or?
Yeah, we have a caller on hold, Dave.
Okay, let's, do I just press this one? Go ahead.
Hi, Dave.
Hi,
Or not.
He might have gotten sick of waiting and hung up.
oh,
Oh, did you hit it? No.
Dave?
Oh,
No.
he's gone. He'll call back.
Oh, well,
Call us back, Dave. Sorry about
So
So-
now schools, they come down and they give you your curriculum, right?
Well, the school, it's the state will tell you these are the things you need for graduation, but within the confines of a district or a school, we might say, I teach freshman English. We get together as a district and say, these are the things that will constitute freshman English.
but what you're talking about, No Child Left Behind, is actually an offshoot of something Hillary Clinton mentioned in her book, which was Goals 2000. And it's basically just changed the name.
Sure.
But right now, and this is again why I kind of oppose to Hillary's approach, because it's a federal program that dictates to the town of Ware and the city of Manchester what you shall teach
Right.
and what progress you have to make. In your wife's situation, in effect, the children in her school could reach 100% efficiency in what their goals. And then the next year they got 100% efficiency. Then the next year they get 99, and in all the those 2 years they would be not improving.
Right, as I understand it, and that's why they do give you, you have to fail to meet that goal X amount of years, and I believe it's 3.
I believe it's 3.
I believe it's 3, and then, let's say, Manchester, we're not, my school wasn't in the 90s, so let's say, in reading, I think we did fairly well, in my opinion, and don't quote me again, but I want to say we were in the high 70s, low 80s. If next year we dip down to 60, if our goal is still, our goal doesn't then go to 63 for this upcoming year, it's still at 83,
Which is a big jump.
which is a big jump.
Right.
But as I understand it again, if we can jump, if any year you jump 10% from your previous year, no matter what your goal is, then it gives you it puts you back in the good graces of
Which
the
is
people.
fair
Sure.
and reasonable.
Which is fair, and then again, you have to meet it that second year. You have to, I believe, meet your goal 2 years to get off of any list you're on.
So if you're in a school in Manchester, and you are hitting, say, 75%, and the federal government says, oh, by the way, you've got to take in these 200 immigrants into your school system,
Well, that's the big thing now in this city.
and they can't even speak English. You typically motivated people because they want to come over here,
Yeah.
Sure.
but still, they can't even speak English.
And the parameters or the requirements are within a year they have to take that test, within a year of being in the country. And,
Right.
and I didn't even mention the test. Granted, I'm an English teacher, and I think the reading and the writing portions are, I would say they're pretty fair. They're not fair for a kid, in high school you only take this test in the 11th grade. So they're not fair for a kid who struggled for the first 10 years of his schooling or her schooling, and then they go, by the way, you have to hit this goal in
Right.
your 11th year. But all in all, I think they're generally pretty fair. The math and the science, bluntly, is from my colleagues' standpoint, a joke. We have very well educated people who, I was a good math student. I look at that math and I go, are you kidding me?
I can do that.
You're kidding me. And these kids are being asked to hit levels. I think in the city of Manchester, in the 30s, were proficient in math at the 11th grade level. I'm not speaking about middle school or the elementaries. There's a problem with a test where only 30% of the kids, because 70% of the kids aren't going, yeah, I don't really think I want to take this test today.
Right.
I don't care
It's
about
not
this.
an attitude issue. It's a
Not to that
ability.
magnitude. I think
Correct.
there is, because again, there's
There's
no,
some.
if I'm a student and I tank on this test, nothing happens to me. They go, geez, you didn't do so well. You could have helped us out. Yeah, I don't care. And that's the sad reality.
Anecdotally, I live in Goffstown, and the first year the students did not take it seriously. They just thought it was a great day. They knew nothing would happen. Okay, and then it was when they saw the results in the paper, they knew
Oh.
that it was serious. And then the next year, the teacher told them, "Yes, it is.
You need to
serious."
take it seriously.
And they did, and Goffstown jumped
Right.
way
Well,
high.
the problem
Yes,
is that
yeah.
we have to.
You have to set goals for the students.
We do, but we also have
yeah.
this is where our population can come into play, and maybe it lends us back to bringing it back full circle to the attitude towards education in the home.
Yes, yeah.
But we are instructed every year come September, middle of September, late September, I talk to every one of my juniors. I have 2 classes that have juniors in them, and I give them the full court press. This is why it matters. It's going to help you on your SAT, which, if we all have to go to college, is a pretty important thing. It's going
Right.
to help you with your ability to critically think, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Let's look at these things, and I try and explain to them the importance of it.
Yeah.
But I can tell them that for 6 weeks. They still know when they walk into that room, it doesn't matter. To them, it does not matter. If our school is a school in need of improvement, they don't. It does matter, because if our school's not accredited, it
Right.
hurts their ability to get into colleges and
Yeah,
things
but
of that
that's only
nature.
that's only a small percentage that are actually intending to go there.
Well, a lot of that's the whole "we're all the best" problem, is that they all think that they're going to survive in college, which goes back to the wonderful point you made about how when they get out into that real world,
They're
and they
shocked.
all say,
Yeah.
I should get this job because I'm me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
And
yeah.
the person
Because
goes,
I'm a
well,
great
no,
guy."
it doesn't really work that way.
Entitlement.
And they go,
Well, that's how I
"No,
got
no,
this
no."
job.
It's true. It is how it got
It does
done.
work every once in a while here. Every once in a while it works. And I've tried it once or twice myself, and it's pretty good laughter when that
But
happens.
anyway, I think we have to do some other stuff too. How much time do we get? 5 minutes or? Okay. One thing I wanted to say is, if you have any comments, we have a Facebook page called Rock, Papers, Hand Grenades. The folks can go to and ask questions. I get a particular question that I want people on Facebook to answer. And this has been upsetting me all week.
Uh-oh. We don't want you upset.
No, it was really, it hurt my feelings. Last week, after the show, we went out to eat, and I was sitting there, and I had
Not the tie.
No, yeah.
Not the
no,
tie.
I had a nice blue shirt, light blue shirt on, and I had
Help
this
me.
tie, okay?
Yeah.
And I said, I like this tie, and my co-host, or my host friend here said, well, at least I can tell you're not gay. And I just don't
Right.
understand what she even meant by that.
Anna, help me.
No.
His daughter's here. You can't just hang that one on me. all
No,
by
I'm
myself.
sorry. That's what she said, and it was really, offensive. I was hurt
Well,
deeply.
a gay person would know better. Now, I
No,
did
that's
notice-
that's what I don't get.
I
What
did
do you
notice
wait,
your
wait.
tie. Did you wear the tie? Did you wear the tie on the show because it matches the clock here?
So
Is that why?
so
you wore
what?
it?
So what?
Is that why you wore
I'm
it?
not saying.
I'm not saying that makes you gay if you intentionally did that. I'm just asking.
No, that's a good point. I'm just saying why.
Well, this tie looks more political. You look more official and
That's true.
state representative.
You look very Republican.
Yes,
in
you
that.
look very Republican.
A very
I'm so proud.
heterosexual Republican.
Oh my gosh.
No,
All right.
anyway.
Anyway, winding down.
Oh, next week. Tell them. No, I'll tell them.
You tell them about next week. First, before
Next-
we tell them about next week,
next-
I want to say thank you to our.
Well, yeah, you can say thank you in a second. So next week
Getting
we've got.
snarky.
Gratitude
Yeah.
can wait.
No, I'm still upset about the tie. Anyway,
Sorry.
next week we're going to cover the Second Amendment, and we're going to have Representative Jen Coffey, who is crazy, and
And we're gonna have guns.
I love crazy.
and
Great combination.
Evan Knapp, who is wrote the book on the laws pertaining to the Second Amendment around the country. It should be a great show, and I'll let you. I'll go.
Don't get
you're
grumpy.
pushing. You're pushing.
Don't get grumpy. Is it that time of month for you?
What?
I don't know. He's not gay.
Still, anyway.
We got a minute. And we got.
All right, we got a minute. I want to thank Ben Dick for joining
Thank
us,
you.
English teacher here in Manchester, and Claire Monnier for taking your precious time out of Senator's campaign. Thank you both for joining us. And of course, Matt, thanks for helping us out. And
my
thanks,
pleasure.
Gary. And hope everyone will join us next week when we talk about the Second Amendment.
And guns.
Guns.
And hand grenades.
No, we're not bringing the hand
Yeah,
grenades.
we're
Good night,
gonna-
everybody.
Good night.